Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another session, another feature in the College to CEO Executive Speaker lineup. I'm Adi, and it's nice to have all of you back. Today, we have a special guest from NPD Technologies. It is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Mr. Darren Person.
Great, thanks, Adi. Great to be here. Great to be here with all the students of Michigan State University. Super thrilled to do this chat with you. Spent some time with Adi and Garth earlier today and just kind of went through ultimately what hopefully be a little bit of my story to you and share a little bit about my career journey with you that landed me ultimately in this game chair, as well as in my role as the global CIO of NPD. So really thrilled to be here. I'd love to just start off by just telling you a little bit about me, what I do, and then happy to drive into all the rest of the areas. So I am Darren Person. I'm the global CIO for the NPD group. Some of you may know about NPD, some may not know who NPD is. So we're a market research company. We have expertise in more than 20 industries. I love data and statistics, so I'll give you some high-level numbers so you can get the scale and size of NPD as a company. We collect point-of-sale data from over 600,000 retail locations, as well as commerce and our mobile platforms. We collect millions of receipts from brick and mortar and e-commerce, things like our product checkout. We have more than 2,000 of the world's leading brands and retailers, which are clients of NPD's. And we do more than 8 million consumer surveys on a monthly basis. We were founded in an annual basis. We were founded in 1966, well over 1,600 employees worldwide, and we have services in 19 countries, the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And really, at the end of the day, we take a lot of our data, we combine it with industry expertise, a little bit of prescriptive analytics, and ultimately use that to help grow our clients' business in what we like to think of as changing the world. So with that, it's a little bit about me professionally. I want to tell you a little bit about my career and the evolution of my career, as I know this is going to help you a little bit on each of your journeys that you're starting. I was very fortunate at a young age. I actually started in technology probably when I was around the age of 8. I started actually doing programming. My parents had bought me this old Commodore 64 computer, and my sister was actually a programmer at the time on what was known as a Wang system. So you're going to have to use Google to even look that up. Even I didn't know what a Wang was until I looked it up. But I remember coming home one day and her putting me on her lap, and we just started, working on this program. And back then, you kind of would subscribe to these magazines, and at the end of each month, in the back of the magazine would be a program that you could write or type into your computer and then hit run, and you'd run the program, whatever it was, simple math calculation or something. And I just remember, sitting on her lap and programming away, and it was just really interesting to think of the computer and the world of technology as this blank canvas, right? And a computer program is really your paintbrush to let you draw and create whatever world you want. And that was my first inclination. I got hooked into it. I then started creating what are called bulletin board apps. So as the technology evolved, I got into the BBSs of the world. So again, for those that don't know, this is pre-internet days. So before the world was all interconnected, computers used to have to call other computers through telephone lines. If anyone has seen war games, very much back like that, where you dial in, two computers would talk to each other, and this was the early days of connecting with people. So from that point on, it really kind of took off for me. I really got into technology and electronics at that point. I started learning a lot of different programming languages and started really creating what eventually became, which is a hobby, but eventually turned into a career. So that's kind of a little bit of background. Before I go into the rest of my career, that's kind of the early foundations of it. Where I am today is, I'm a husband, a father, and a dog lover. I've been married for 17 years now. I have a 15-year-old daughter. Her name's Kylie, a 13-year-old son, Mac. So my daughter is about to start the college search. So if any of you have feedback or ideas for me of things that I could tell her that you've learned, would love to hear from you after the chat. You'll get my contact information and would love to hear from you as well, especially as we go down this new journey of looking at universities as well. And we also have two adorable pups. I have a French bulldog. His name is Leo. And we have what we call the COVID puppy. We got another dog named Frankie. She's a pug, and we named her after if any of you remember Men in Black, the pug Frank. So it was a girl, so we named her Frankie to keep in connection. I also coach my son's baseball team. I am a huge cheerleader for my daughter. She plays varsity tennis in high school. Just some other stuff. I love my Dan Brown books. So if anyone's a big fan of Dan Brown, he's one of my favorite authors. I've read all his books 2 to 3 times. And there's a favorite quote that I always like to use, especially in the data business, by a guy named Peter Sandergaard, and it says, "Information is the oil of the 21st century, and analytics is the combustion engine." And I think you'll get some of that as we talk a little bit about the evolution of the career from left to right. So you got a little bit about my background, a little bit about as a young kid, I learned technology and got into technology. In my early years as teenagers, I was kind of the techie of the neighborhood. My father would offer my services out to all the neighbors who ever got a computer, so that I could help them and fix their computer problems. And I then started a small business of actually building computers for people. And that was a really interesting part of my career, where I build computers and sell them to people who wanted their computers and wanted the right things. So I never liked the prefabricated machines, because it always came with some good parts, but also some junky parts. And I always wanted really good quality components in the computer. So I started doing that actually in my early teenage years. And really, again, just stayed close to technology. And then as I got into high school, I'll never forget one day, my father came in and he's like, "I think it's time for you to get a real job." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, if you're going to start dating soon, it's time for you to pay your own way if you're going to go out to movies and whatever else." So I actually went up the block. There was a drugstore called Genevieve's Drugstore. It was up the block. Think of it like a CVS or a Rite Aid or Walgreens, whatever's in your neighborhood. And I started off as a stock boy in the store. I was unpacking goods, and I was putting stuff on shelves. And what I noticed when I was in there was this unique area which called the photo lab. Now you all see this today because you send all of your photos to the photo lab, they get printed out, and you walk in and you take it away. But back then, the photo lab was all chemical based, but with a touch of technology in it. There were big machines that actually would run all of your photos through these chemical baths in order to print out your photos the old fashioned way, before all the digital stuff came in. But what I was drawn to was the technology of the photo lab, right? It was a big computer to me, and I was really interested in that. So what I did was, as a stock boy, is I made good friends with the guy that ran the photo lab. And what I said to him is if he would be interested in helping me learn how this whole system, worked. I was just fascinated by it. I wanted to learn more about it. So he offered, when he was working, for me to come in after hours and just spend time working with him and watching him in the lab. And I took him up on it. And then probably about 4 or 5 months later, I was pretty efficient in the lab at that point. I'd come into work and it was in chaos. The gentleman that was running the lab, I guess, had left the company, or they got into a fight with the manager. He quit, and the lab was like in disarray. Like no one was there to open the lab. No one was there to do anything. So I went over to my manager and I said, "Hey, I've been training with the gentleman that runs the lab. I know how to do this. I'd love the opportunity to go open the lab." And he did. He gave me the opportunity. I ran the lab. We had one of the best days from number of reels that we were able to get in and out of the system. And at the end of the day, I approached him and I said, "Hey, if you think things went well, what I would love to do is it's really easy for you to replace someone at a stock clerk level it takes a lot of time to learn this role. If you would be open to it, I'd love the opportunity to take this position. And he was thrilled, right? Because I was cheap. I was a heck of a lot less money than the guy that was in there who was certified. And I was well ready to start tomorrow. And so we did. And I actually ran the lab for the next couple of years as I was in high school, at night times and on the weekends, really driving that with a few other people. And I think that was one of my first early learned lessons in my career, was about how you position yourself for that next job well before you actually have the next job. And I think that was a big learned lesson for me, was how to start to think about that. And that's something I share with you guys as a way to think about your career journey when you get out into the workforce. Should always be positioning yourself for that role that you want. It may not be the role that you have today, but make sure that you're that next person in line for that. So all that said, it was really fun. It was a cool learned lesson, but let's spring forward a little faster now. So in high school, finishing up, when I started looking at jobs in the market, I was a bit overwhelmed. And the overwhelming part was, how do I gain all these years of experience that everyone is asking me to gain and to have when I haven't even entered the workforce yet, right? I was actually in between my senior year of high school and about to go off to college. And I was trying to predict how in the world to get, when the job market opened up, how do I go 4 years in college and still be able to get a job after going to college? Because I'd be 4 more years longer without real experience, hands-on experience, which every job at that time was asking for. So my father and I had a debate. I had done a great internship with a company called CNA Financial my senior year of high school, and they actually offered me a full-time job. And I was at this crossroads with my dad, who is a 40-plus year veteran. He worked for the same company his entire career. And I was at this point where I was offered this really great job, which was making a lot more money than he made at the time in technology. And he was pretty savvy. He said no. So you guys know you're going to college. But it was an interesting pivot point to think through, like, how do you gain that experience? So then over the next few years, one of the things that I did each summer was I spent a lot of time working on getting internships. So I interned for some of the coolest companies, I think, in the world over those summers. But again, I kind of knew pretty early on what I wanted to do with my career. So I was very fortunate that technology, which was really a hobby, evolved into a career. I wanted to use technology to solve business problems. I enjoyed using technology to solve problems that people had, ways to think about applying technology to automate things. Again, there was no career yet defined. This was the early, the mid 90s. It wasn't really truly defined at that point in time, but I kind of had an idea of what I really liked and what I enjoyed doing. So with that, over each summer that I worked or that I went to college, I spent time really identifying companies that I wanted to intern with, that I felt could help me get further to that objective of running and doing technology further in my career. So I started with a company like Young and Rubicam. I did an internship with Person Marsteller. I did an internship with Anderson Consulting. I think you know them now as Accenture. And I used those as opportunities to build my resume so that when I got out into the job market, that I already was grounded with solid expertise in there. During my time in college, I made the most of it. I majored in computer science, or computer information systems now. I really wanted computer science was actually, let's come back. Computer science at that time was an interesting field. So I had felt that there was this major gap with the computer science programs, which were very, very heavily focused purely on math and computer science alone. And I always felt there was two missing pieces in the curriculums. One of them was speech communication. How do you take complex technology terms and actually translate that to business problems? And the second one was really around business. In order to, this world runs on business, right? We deliver value through business. So being a technologist in a business world, I felt you always really needed to understand the fundamentals of what it was to run and drive a business. And those were typical gaps in the programs when I had first started. So I had worked closely with the faculty at my university to create what is now called information systems, where we replaced a lot of the specific discrete mathematics courses and drove them and changed those into business courses. So things like organizational behavior and international business systems. And we really kind of created this merged program. And then I did my minor in speech communications to really fill that last hole. I started a computer sciences club in college, and I really was very active with the faculty and participating with them and working with them as we built things like this, having executives come in and speak to students about their experiences. And I told Adi this before, like, this is a really neat thing that you guys have here for yourselves, where you can bring these executives in and to talk to you about our experiences. This is something I would have loved to have had more of in the early days of my career, to hear what other people went through. So let's fast forward. I graduate from college. At that point, again, another decision point. Do I go to graduate school or do I not go to graduate school? Around then was the dot-com boom. The market was getting really hot, and I was nervous that I would miss the opportunity if I continued in university later on for an MBA or a master's program. So I jumped right into the workforce. I actually started with a company called American Management Systems. Think of them like the Anderson Consulting, but instead of a private sector, it was government and education. It was early start. The recruiter had promised me a whole lot of neat opportunities, that I'd be working with modern technologies and all of these things. And when I actually landed in my job, I was kind of a COBOL programmer in the world of JCL. So if anyone knows what that is, job control language, it was very, very old, even for the late 90s. It wasn't the latest technology, which at that time was more Java-based programming. And really what wound up happening was I stayed there probably about 3 months, and I made the decision that this just didn't feel right for me. And when I remember going to my dad and saying, I'm going to change jobs, and the look on his face after 3 months of being with a company, remember, he was a 40-year plus person. Like, he had this loyalty to the company. And for me to go to him and say, 3 months, this isn't right for me, I'm out of here. It didn't comprehend it. So I made a couple of calls to some colleagues and friends, and I landed a job at a company called USA Networks, which you're probably familiar with. So they're a cable network. And I was really fascinated because my undergraduate, I did it at like a college, which was a TVR school, television and radio. And I was always interested in getting into TV, which is why I went to a TVR school. So this job at USA opened up. It was like a senior programmer job. I got in there. I was really excited about stuff. I was there for a couple of months. We were doing some really neat projects. And lo and behold, the dot-com boom really took off. And before I know it, the IT organization around me just vanished one day. And what I mean that is one of the heads of technology got this new job with an early stage startup company. They left. They started taking people away from the company. And before I knew it, a lot of the organization that we had at senior leadership was largely decimated by this whole, I think today we kind of call it the Great Resignation, but we kind of had a mini Great Resignation back in the late 90s with all the dot-coms starting up and pulling employees out of corporate America into these smaller startup areas. And so look, at that point in time, I had two decisions to make. I was invited to join and go to that new startup, and it was an exciting startup with lots of upside and options and stock. Or I could flip over and say, okay, this is also now an opportunity for me inside of the company that I'm with, given that there's no one else left, someone's got to help rebuild this technology group inside this company. So I actually chose the latter, believe it or not. They actually made a great offer to me at the startup, but I went up, I met with the HR team, and I talked to them and I said, hey, look, there's an opportunity for me to leave, but I really think that given where things are, I feel pretty good where I am at this company, and I want the opportunity to help you rebuild the organization here at USA. And I remember I had met the CFO of the company, and he put a lot of faith in me, gave me a lot of opportunities, and I got promoted very, very quickly. I was a senior. I got moved to a project manager, then a senior project manager, and then a director of technology. And that was all by the age of 23 at that point. So I had moved really quickly. You know, directors were pretty much 35s and 40-year-olds. So I was the young kid in the older group at that time. And then USA got bought by Vivendi Universal. I had left. I had went and did some consulting work for a little while. I thought that was pretty interesting. We started playing a little bit with things like outsourced CTOs. But ultimately, the dot-com bust came just as quickly as the dot-com boom. And before you knew it, the job market was scarce again with jobs. Ironically, I then went to work for a company called Adecco. Adecco is actually, what they did is they helped place people in jobs, but I actually went to go work for Adecco, actually working for the company. And I did that for about a year and a half, about maybe 2 years. And then I realized like I enjoyed the business, but I really liked television as a core business. That was where my interest was. So I got an opportunity to go work for a company called Lifetime Television. I left kind of that consulting gig. I went to go work for Lifetime Television, again, back in media and entertainment. It was really exciting. It was about bridging online and on air. So think of it like, you know, when we show promotions on TV, how much can we drive traffic to our website, to our mobile games, to our mobile devices? I was at Lifetime for a couple of years. And then I was actually presented with this huge opportunity. My boss at the time, really great guy, he had come to me and said that he was interviewing for a job at a company called CBS, so CBS Television, for those that know Channel 2 in most states. And he was looking at the job and he said, you know, this isn't right for me, but this could be a great opportunity for you. They're looking for someone a little bit more technical and hands-on. I thought that was like a weird moment where my boss was actually the person helping me figure out my next job. But that's probably the one thing that I would tell you I appreciated the most about that relationship was that trust that we had built over the years, where he felt comfortable coming to me and offering me this opportunity for me to go and think about. So I went and I interviewed with CBS. It was an amazing opportunity. It was a CTO role. At that time, I was only 29 years old. I was quite nervous about it because I had built for the last several years a good relationship. I loved my boss. I loved what I did. But it was one of those moments where it was, you know, basically time to grow up and to try to feel if I could take on some of these more senior leadership challenges and drive that forward. So I did. I took the role at CBS. It was exciting. I was there for another 3 years. It was phenomenal. We built some of the coolest technology solutions. We built some of the world's largest, at the time, content management platforms. So if you think about like how you distribute news on a global level, and to do it near instantly across hundreds of web properties, that was really the role. And we had built some of my favorite technologies at that time, really kind of pushing the boundaries, integrating with events like March Madness and delivering tons and tons of video over the internet. And it was a really great experience. I learned so much from that, and it was fascinating. And then if you remember the shakeup that happened around 2008 in the economy. So, you know, as a television station where most of your revenue is generated by American automakers, when the market kind of collapsed back in 2008, we saw revenue instantly vanish. And that created a whole bunch of challenges and opportunities again. And with that, I made another decision, company called Elsevier, which is the world's largest publisher of science, technology, engineering, and medicine content, had reached out about this role as like a chief architect for their organization. And I actually wound up jumping ship from CBS, going to Elsevier, and really kind of thinking through like, what are the key and critical components of that move? Like, why go from CBS to a media and publishing company? And a lot of that was around self-reflection and taking a look at my career. And I'll tell you this interesting story is where my career was and where I wanted it to be. One of the things that I would do is I always keep an eye on the market, and I'd see these opportunities come up, CIO role for company X or CTO role for company Y. And I was always curious to know why I wasn't getting the phone calls. So I found a few of these opportunities, and I actually found the recruiter who was doing the recruitment. And I reached out to the recruiter and I said, hey, I'm curious, how come I didn't get a phone call when you guys were looking for this? And I've done this with a few different recruiters, and they introduced me to this kind of self-reflection model where I would kind of look at the roles that I think I wanted to be introduced for or be known for. So when they came up to market, that I'd be on people's lists. And then I would look at what I've done and the size of my career at that time and figure out where are the gaps. And at that time, one of the biggest gaps I had was I had scale, I had size, I didn't have international experience. And I had this job with Elsevier that was in front of me. I had another job with a company called TheStreet.com. And then I had another opportunity with iVillage, which was a NBC Universal property. iVillage was probably the most logical choice. But when I actually went back and looked at what I needed, which was this international expertise, the only company at that time that was offering that was Elsevier. I went to Elsevier. I spent almost a decade of my career at that company. I changed roles. I started as a chief architect. I ran technology, and then I led both product and technology when I ended my time or my last few years at Elsevier, which was a tremendous experience gain and a super exciting time. And then this opportunity that I'm in now, and then I'll be quiet, let you guys ask some questions, came up, which today is the NPD group. I went in 2018, I went for my MBA. So I did eventually go back. I got my MBA from Columbia here in New York. And during that time, I met a bunch of really great people. I still chat with most of them today. But one person I actually met who worked at NPD, we did a bunch of projects. So I kind of got to know the company a bit. And then when the search for their CIO came up, she had reached out to me. We made some introductions, and I got to meet the CFO and the chairman and the CEO of the company. And I fell in love with the leadership team from day one, and we had a great conversation. They were Long Island based, so I live in Sayville. They were in Port Washington. It was a small commute, and I was fascinated with what the company did. I shared a lot of that with you earlier, and I landed my job here at NPD. I've been here for about 3 years now, and we're doing such amazing stuff. We're replatforming. We're enabling so many cool things with our clients and really helping come up with new products for the market, mostly products that customers really want. So I think that's a really exciting thing. And it's a data company. In today's day and age, 2021, 2022, data is everything. I think that quote that I read you earlier about it being the new oil, it's really true. And there's no place better to be than in a company where we process close to 8 billion POS data entries on a monthly basis. You'll hear most companies talk about big data. A lot of them are talking about legacy big data or log file big data. NPD is big data. This is what we do. That data drives our business. It drives our clients. It drives our partnerships. It is the core of the company, and that's really, really exciting. So that's a little bit about my journey. I thought I'd share a little bit with you. Hopefully, any of those anecdotes and stories help you on your journeys, but more than happy to jump in and answer and talk through any questions or thoughts that you guys have. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
To be fair, that was a pretty long and interesting journey with a bunch of unexpected curves, not gonna lie. One good thing that is not so consistent with many of the leaders that we've had on here before is you, through early experiences, very early on, you knew exactly what you wanted to do. Pardon me, where you wanted to go. where you wanted to go and how you wanted your career to shape up. I know you spent a little bit of time talking about this, but I want to hear more on how was college for you, knowing that this is where you wanted to be. Was it like, was it always like you had the end goal in mind, or was there any exploratory things that you did in college that really helped you find out more about yourself and your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it was interesting for me, like, so the core, my major was super easy. And the fact that a lot of the core classes, I had already been experienced in a lot of it. So when it came to the programming classes, the architecture classes, like I had already spent quite a bit of time in the industry as well as just on my own. And in those early stages, a lot of ways we were a little bit ahead of where the faculty was in the curriculum. In fact, we were pushing the curriculum further along. I think we created one of the first Java programming. In fact, I think I taught a Java programming class before they offered it as the core curriculum course, because at that time they were only teaching C++. And I was frustrated by the fact that they weren't offering Java. And I felt like that was the future programming that we really needed to know and to learn. So I had worked with the faculty, and we actually wound up creating like a 1-credit course. And then eventually the whole C++ programming course was converted over to Java to follow the industry. So there was a lot of like push and tug at that time. And also when I went to college, it was more about, there was a big disparity between faculty who truly believed that their job was to set you up for your master's and your PhD work versus prepping you to be ready to get a job. And I always felt very strongly like it should be both, right? And you should have that option as a student to make that choice. So what I was always looking for was more certification classes that would align to when I got out of school. Not only did I have the degree, but what tangible real world skill set did I apply? So back in the day, and this is going to date me a little bit, networking wasn't as ubiquitous as it was now. There was specialized software. It was a company called Novell at the time. This was before Windows networking was available. They were the company that were linking the world together. And my networking class was only about how to program and build your own network. And I was like, why should I go build this and design it when everyone else in the world is using this software? If I can be an expert in actually understanding how to make that software work, that would be a cool add-on on top of the networking class. So it was important to understand the theory, but how do I now take that theory and make it a tangible skill set that would give me marketable skills when I went into the job field? So that was a lot of push and pull. I know I didn't make a ton of friends throughout my college careers as far as like pushing the faculty further than where they wanted to go. But overall, I think we had a really good program because of it. And I think if you take look at a lot of the curriculums now, there's actually a lot more. So I think where everyone is fortunate now is a lot of the curriculums today are much more tangible, that you'll have tangible skills when you go into a job. And it's nice to have seen that evolution in the college curriculum.
That's pretty cool. And going off of that, most of the important factors that played into, you deciding your future, you deciding your career came through experiences, came through non-academic stuff. Like, for example, your experience with the photo booth, the lab, my bad. And, your interest in building computers and things like that. I want you to talk a little bit about a good grade on a course versus an experience outside the course. How would you, weigh the scale between a good GPA versus extracurricular activities, especially through college?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm at the point where I'm having this conversation actually with my daughter, and it's a funny one. So in high school, you're trained to prepare yourself with good grades, because when you get there, the person who's admitting you to college is going to look at your SAT scores. They're going to look at your GPA. That currently weighs 99%, I think, into what you do. And then, of course, there's all the other stuff like the clubs that you go into and the sports that you do. And maybe in some cases, sports outweigh the others if you're going for a sports scholarship. But for the most part, you're very academically driven by your grades. When you get to college at that point, and this is actually the conversation I had with my daughter, I said, what are those grades there to help you achieve at that point? You're there, you go to college to really learn the material, to understand it, to build a good foundation and expertise, and to give you a broad array of experiences, right? College is not just about taking classes and getting grades. It's really the whole experience and meeting people and learning to work with people. Like, that's why a lot of the schools have evolved to project-oriented work. Like, that's what you're going to be doing when you get into the workforce. You're going to be graded in the workforce by your peers, by your groups that you're working with, by your management team, by your leadership team. Ultimately, those grades are there to help you understand whether or not you've mastered the content. It is not the thing that when I go to someone's resume, I don't go to the GPA section and go, oh, they were a 3.9. This other person was a 3.7. I'm going to make my decision on that. Is it something that weighs in? I mean, if it's ridiculously tight, I may glance at that area, but I focus on the experience. I focus on the story, right? Can you tell me the story of what you did? Look, we can talk about things like you could read a book and know how to change a tire on a car. I want the person who's changed 3 tires, right, as the one with the experience to kind of come in. So I think a big part of it is really learning how do you get that experience, but it still has to be founded in the grounds of what you're doing. And the difference between a 3.5 and a 3.8 and a 3.9, that to me is less as important as, did you understand the material and can you apply that material now to a real world scenario? Personal opinion, of course, but
Oh no, I think that's the best way to put it. If there's a difference between, or if there's somebody who's read the best book in the world about how to change a tire, and then there's a guy who's actually changed the tire 3 times, failed a couple of times, maybe it definitely makes more sense to have somebody on your, to employ somebody who's actually gone down there and had real world experience. So that's an amazing way to put it. Thank you for sharing that. So coming off of that, a little on the tangent is, I want to ask you, if there was one trait that has to stand out, or you're looking for, or there's a reason you would employ somebody on as you bring them onto your team, what would that be?
One trait.
Yep. Or if you have a couple, that's cool.
Yeah, no. I look for passion. Right? It's that simple. Anyone can learn anything, right? With enough work, enough grit, they can go learn it. If you don't love what you do, if you're not passionate about what you do, if you don't see this as the future of what you want to do, everything else at that point falls off a cliff. So for me, I think it's about being passionate. I always look for that when I'm talking to somebody and I'm asking them questions. Do they get excited about the topic? Are they like, oh yeah, that could be interesting, and fall away? Or are they highly engaged? Are they, as we're talking, are they coming up with ideas in real time, and building on what we're talking about, whatever that topic is? If it's programming, it's like, oh, did you know you could do this? Or, I don't know if you saw this, but I read this article and da-da-da. Just to show that passion, like the rest of it comes. If you don't have that passion up front, there's not much you're going to be able to train and teach.
Okay, that's pretty cool. That's something I will keep in my mind as I go through my interviews with my recruiters. I'm going to talk to them about the latest and greatest in the current affairs of everything related to computer science, or, good way to show my passion. But no, I completely agree with what you're saying. Passion is something that's hard to come by everywhere, especially, with people aligning to exactly what they want to pursue their career in. So coming off of that, the next question I want to ask you is, you knew you wanted to do technology. You knew you wanted to, work a lot, build your career basically on, coding and computer science. You even had the passion to teach courses before they even did. looking back now, let's look at college. I don't know, junior or senior Darren Person, and to the Darren Person today, who's CIO of NPD. Is Darren Person of college really proud of who you are today? Is this what the ultimate goal was, or what changed?
No, I think so. I kind of think of it the other way. I always think, would my dad be proud of where I've gotten to today? And I think, again, a lot of it depends on how you define success in your life, in your career. My dad hated what he did. He did it really well. He was very good at it. He was an amazing provider. But I saw in his face how much he didn't like what he did. And I would tell you, no matter I was very fortunate, right? Money and the field itself could have gone one of two ways. Technology could have either taken off, or it could have also gone a very different way. I was fortunate to be right at the heart when technology was moving into its prime, and it was a hot area, and obviously financial aspirations were there, and you can make a lot of money in technology. At the end of the day, when I really look back at it all, we live within our means. I have an amazing wife. I have two amazing kids. We've got two great dogs. And when you take a step back and I think of the career drivenness that I had early on, I would tell you, absolutely. I think where I am today is exactly where I wanted to be. And having that Northern Star early on helped me make decisions to help me get to where I wanted to be. But it was a lot of my wife who grounded me in, hey, while you're doing all this stuff and your head is down, pick your head up every once in a while and enjoy the moment and look around and all of that. So I do think there's probably some feedback that I give to myself around, if your choice is between studying and trying to get that 4.0 versus going out with your friends and getting that 3.8 or 3.75, go out with your friends. Go and enjoy college. Go enjoy your time. You've got the rest of your life to go work and to do, the day-to-day grind. College is supposed to be this amazing experience, and you've got to give yourself the opportunity to enjoy it. And I'll tell you, I enjoyed it the second time when I went for my MBA in 2018. Having known that and then going back for my MBA, it made that experience so much richer because it helped me value maybe some of the opportunities I had said no to, or I had skipped out on going out with my friends for, drinks one night because I had a big test I had to, do really well on and excel on. I try to break that up now. And even my daughter, she's very grade driven. And now I find myself going, does it really matter? Does it matter that you get that 98 on your test? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, no. So anyway, that would be my advice, is give yourselves a chance as you're going through the journey to really enjoy it as you go through the whole experience.
So as you went through your career, one job to another, one city to another, we heard a lot about, grabbing on opportunities and moving ahead. Were there any mistakes in that? Is there anything in your career path, a decision you made, a choice you pursued that you regret today?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, plenty of mistakes. None that I regretted, and I didn't regret them because I didn't let them linger. Now, I shared that example where my first job, I found myself in this COBOL programming job and I saw no future. I had a point in time I could stay with that job, and just because that's what you did is you stayed with your job, or you could make the decisions and you pivoted. I would say anytime a job or a role didn't feel right or something changed and it didn't feel right, the mistake would have been staying with it versus figuring out what the best thing was for me to do. Not taking phone calls from recruiters would have been mistakes. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to opportunities that are coming your way. There's always a way to make something happen. I look at jobs as there's your job description, and then there's what you really do when you get in there. And those tend to be very different from one another. And honestly, when you get into a company, that's your fingerprint. You can make that whatever you want it to be. You can decide to stay within your box and within whatever that job is. My job says I have to do this, 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 and this, and therefore that's what I'm going to go do. Or you could be the person, like I shared with my early story, where I could have just said, look, I'm going to be the stock boy. I'm not going to go look at that photo lab. I'm never going to say, I'll just do this and do it really well. Or if you are looking ahead and that's what you want to do and you see something different, go outside your box, right? Find ways to adapt and grow. But I think the biggest mistake would be limiting yourself to just the job description if that's not what you want. If it is what you want, if that's what you love, then and you don't want to leave your box, that's okay too. But if you're doing it just because that's the way it is, then I think that would be a bigger mistake than pivoting and moving as you need to.
Have you ever felt like in any of the roles you held on to a job for longer than you should have?
So if I'm very fair with you, my last role, it was the first time I was in a job for more than 3 years. So, and I will tell you, so 3 years, I had 3 different roles inside that company. So other than being with the same company, I still didn't have the same job for more than 3 to 4 years inside of a company. I would say there is a period of time where your shelf life starts to wear off in an organization. I don't know if I have hit that yet in a company, if I've been there long enough for that. But I can certainly see it.
Okay. Along your journey also, just to get a feel of, all of us look up to CEOs or chief executives and, think that it is such a, ideal place to be in, which is, everybody has that sweet journey to the top and things like that. But I know it's different. So I want to hear from you. Were there any sacrifices that you have had to make along your journey, even today?
Yeah. Look, I think all of us have, I shouldn't say all of us, but those who are truly aspirational, you've got these visions of wanting to be at the top of the org chart. And I would tell you, the journey is an interesting one to get there. It's a little bit lonelier than most people think at the very top of the org. And I think that one's kind of an important one to understand, that as you move up in your career, I think a lot of people see it as, the leadership team, they kind of make these big decisions and they push these ideas down, and, they never understand what ramifications they have. This is just like noise and things that I thought about as I was moving up the food chain. And I think the reality is that there is the gravity of these decisions, these choices are just so much larger, the larger the organizations are that you overall see and run. So if you think about it, at the top of an organization of 1,400 people, you have a bullhorn. Like when the CEO of the company says something, the organization mobilizes, even if that wasn't the intended consequence, because everyone is really looking to help support the leadership in the company. And it's amazing how you have to really think about what you say, how you say it, how you deliver your message, to make sure that people just don't start running and doing things in an organization without better clarity. So I think being mindful, being understanding of that. One of the things that I like to do is I do these what's on your mind sessions. And this actually came up with when I was early in my career. My CFO would always do these lunch and learn sessions. And what we do is I grab about 5 to 8 people from around the company at all levels of the company, don't care who they are. And it's really just get a chance to spend some time with me to tell me what's on their minds. It's not for me to tell them what's on my mind. I have that bullhorn. I can go do that corporate town hall and share my thoughts and opinions. But how do I get the real insights of what's going on in the company? And the way to do that is to just continually spend time with the people on the ground. I don't care how high you go in a company. that is probably the most grounding thing you can do as a leader, is make sure that you constantly engage with all of your new hires, all of the people in the company, because that's where the insights are. That's where, as a leader, you grow more through empathy than just through executive presence. And the decisions you make at that point are then grounded in reality versus maybe done a bit more in an ivory tower.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Coming off of that, I want to ask you, how do you measure success? How would you measure success for a college student? How would you measure success for an entry-level job? Somebody who just accepted their entry-level job or working their first month, versus for a manager or a chief executive. How do you measure success for each of us in our own individual parts at different stages of our life?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think, look, at every stage in your life, you've got to decide what's important. In a company, if you think about the pandemic, one of the things that happened for most organizations is focus really came into clarity, right? Where organizations said, okay, the world is going crazy. What are the 2 to 3 things that we need to do to be successful? Whether that was, we need to, be flat to revenue, we need to do these things. And then all these companies mobilized around those things. So what you'll hear a lot of, especially hopefully over your next couple of sessions, what you do with other people, is you should hear a pretty similar story about how fast companies did their digital transformations through the pandemic. And when you pick that apart to understand how and why that happened, it's going to come down to focus. What was the most important thing at the time? The digital transformation was the most important thing at the time. And that's why people were able to move quickly. I share that with you because at each stage in your life, you've got to decide what's important and at what stage. In the very, very early stages, it's your grades, and you're going to be measured and vetted in high school by your grades. At college, it's going to be about you learning the material and understanding the material and how to apply it. Your grade, to me, is an artifact of your mastery of the material, but you'll really be challenged that first job at a college where you have to start to apply it, and that will be your point of departure. And at that point in your career, you can make a couple of decisions. One of them is, do I want to focus on the things that I like and where I want to go? Do I want to focus on money? If money is important to you, you'll make a series of steps that will help you get demonstrably faster at increases in compensation. You may take jobs that you don't like, right? You may have someone who loves programming, but in order to get more money, maybe the only way they can go is go into a managerial role. And maybe they don't want to be a manager. So now they have this decision to make in their career as to what they should be doing, is really to go into a role they don't like, or to stay in the role they like, even though maybe there's a ceiling on numbers. So each of these focuses, I think, are unique for where people are in their lives. As you get older, I'm 44, so I like to think I'm not old. But when I was your guys' age, I thought I was old. So I can appreciate it. But at this point, it's really, for me, like, I have 2 kids. For me, it's less about the money and more about the family and the quality time, making sure that I can be there to see my son play his baseball game and my daughter be in her tennis matches, and that there's a better balance of work life. So again, everyone's got to decide what those are, but those should be the metrics that each person uses to define success. I'd love to tell you success is some thing. It's a number, it's a salary range, but I think it's different for everyone. And I think everyone's got to decide what that is for themselves.
That's fair. That's a fair point. So talking about goals and where to start, I want to ask you this question, and I think there's nobody better to answer this question than you. What do I have to do today? What do I have to start learning and doing today to have your job in 10 years?
That's a great question, actually. I think, first and foremost, my job specifically, I think, it's a lot of making sure that you understand the business today. So what does the company do? What's the goal of the company? What's the aspiration of the company? as a technology lead, there's an underlying expectation that you're going to keep the company fresh with technology. So how are you staying abreast of the latest and the greatest tools and technologies? And more importantly, how do you actually apply that into the business context, right? You can be the best technologist in the world, but if you don't really understand how to take that technology to solve business problems and how to apply that into a business, it's not going to lead you to the transformation work that you want to have. The other part would be is as you look at your decisions, right? What I would probably do is take a look at the attributes that you see as leaders that are like, someone like me or maybe two others, get some time with them, and then figure out in your career path, what are the kinds of roles that you need to take over the next few years to prepare yourself for that kind of a role. So if you think about the story with the recruiters, right? Spend time with people and advisors who can tell you, hey, Adi, you've got this, this, and this, but you're missing this, this, and this. And when you look for that next role, look for the role that gives you the opportunity to address those gaps up until the point where, it's very difficult to go from 0 to 10 years. It's going to be a bit of a journey along the way. So I would think of them as step functions. And how do you take the biggest steps forward, but just big enough that you also don't create an opportunity where you completely fail and get discouraged. You're going to have failures along the way. We all make mistakes. So you want the step to be big enough, but not so big that you have no experience whatsoever and that you create, it's more of a, companies will get through your failures. It's more people don't get through their own failures. So you want to have enough failure that you can learn, but not so much that you feel demoralized and you're like, oh, this field just isn't for me.
Fair. That's a fair point. I'll jump on to the next question asked by the group. What is one thing you did that was the single best decision you made for your career?
I had a few of them. Leaving that first company as early as I left that first company was by far my best decision. Not staying in a job that I knew was a bad decision.
Okay. I think that's a fair point, and that's something that we all need to learn. I don't think I'm confident enough to say and pull the trigger, saying even if it is a course, even if it's an organization that I'm a part of, I don't think I'm confident enough to pull the trigger and say, no, this is not working for me, and maybe switch it up, pull the trigger, and try something else. So that's something we gotta learn. Another question from the group is, what's next for you? Where to from here? What's your next goal?
So, look, I've got a large transformation right now with NPD. This is one of my favorite things to do in a company. I'm loving what I'm doing. I love the company that I'm in. When I think about my next opportunity, it's to set NPD up for success. It's to see our clients be successful with what we do. It's to build a whole bunch of people in our organization to be successful in their careers. I shared with you the example of, one of my former bosses creating this opportunity for me to go and grow. And that's something I took with me a long time. And I'll always tell people at NPD, one of my aspirations is my job as the head of technology, no matter what company it is, it's to create future leaders in the industry, whether that's with NPD or outside of NPD. It is what it is. But my job is to make sure that we set people up for success. And if that means they leave the company and become successful somewhere else, my failure as a leader will be my people going to another company and not having the requisite skill sets to be successful in their next job. Again, whether that's with NPD or outside of NPD. So that's a big focus for me, is wherever I land, whatever company it is, my core energy and focus is making sure that we continue to build and put out into the market the best we can, because that's the future, right? Technology is going to continue to drive so much of what we do. And there's so much opportunity out there for us as leaders to create that and help our people achieve some amazing things. I'll tell you a funny story, which is, so my boss back in the day who got me that role at CBS. He actually eventually became someone who worked for me later on in my career. And I think if you think about that, those relationships that you build up, that person who you're sitting with and coaching and mentoring today is potentially your future boss in the future. So build those relationships, and it all pays itself back in the long tail.
Okay. Yes, that was a good answer too. And I just noticed we're already 1 minute over time. It's crazy. We've just been talking about a lot of important things. So I'll ask you one more question. I really want to know this. So if again, taking you back to your college days, if 2021 Darren Person was to give one piece of advice to junior or senior Darren Person in college, knowing everything that you know now, with all your experience, if there's one piece of advice you have to share, what would it be?
I think it's got to be, just don't take no for an answer. If you feel strong, if you feel passionate about something, I'll always say, I always put the company and the strategy as a company in front of everything else. I'm always happy to stand on my soapbox if it means helping the organization that I'm part of be successful, even if it may not go with all the grains, the right grains, and the right general motion. But I think just stick to your guns, go with what feels right, dive all in. And again, if you drive that focus, there is no doubt in my mind that you can't be successful if you give it your all. So just continue to do that, and things will fall into place as they may.
That's beautiful. That's something I will hold close to me as I graduate and go through my career. But thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for spending all this time with us and sharing your personal experiences, your personal advice. That was a lot of, I could really see that you were sharing it straight out of your experiences and straight out of your heart. So thank you so much. As students, we really appreciate that. And for all the students who attended as well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you gained a lot from today's session. I sure did. And thank you for joining again. And stay tuned for our next session in the College to CEO Executive Speaker Series. Thanks and have a good night.